Today's story is about a unique pill that, once consumed, turns an ordinary person into the smartest individual in the world. Not only that, but they also become so impressive that they attract attention everywhere, especially from women, and can accomplish any task in mere minutes. Let's dive into the full story. The story begins with Eddie, a man who dreams of becoming a writer. After a long struggle, he manages to secure a small book writing assignment from a publisher. However, Eddie hasn't written a single word yet. Every day he writes a little and then deletes it. Eddie is extremely confused about his future and frustrated with his failing life. Things take a turn for the worse when his girlfriend Lindy breaks up with him due to his lack of direction and success. Before this, Eddie was married to a woman named Melissa, but she too left him because of his laziness and inability to achieve anything. Now, defeated and exhausted, Eddie is wandering through the city on his way back to his apartment. On the way, he runs into his ex-wife's brother, Vernon. They sit down at a cafe and have a conversation where Eddie shares his miserable life story. Vernon, understanding Eddie's struggles, decides to help him. He offers Eddie a small pill and explains that it's not an ordinary pill. Vernon assures him that this pill will clear his mind and allow him to excel in any task. Initially, Eddie laughs and dismisses it as a joke, but Vernon insists and gives him his contact card in case he needs further help. Desperate to change his life, Eddie decides to take the pill before reaching his apartment. As soon as he takes the pill, he encounters his landlord, who angrily reminds him about his unpaid rent. Eddie, still under the pill's influence, feels a rush of clarity. His memory sharpens to the point where he can recall every book he's ever read. Spotting a law book in his landlord's bag, Eddie starts giving her valuable insights about law and even suggests better books to study. Impressed by his sudden intelligence, the landlord forgives him. Eddie returns to his messy apartment and, for the first time, notices how unorganized his life has been. He cleans everything with astonishing speed and focus, as if he has the brain power of 10 people. Then he sits down and begins writing his book with incredible fluency and creativity. By the next morning, the pill's effects have worn off, and Eddie is back to his old self. However, the previous night's work wasn't for nothing. He managed to finish the entire book. Without wasting time, he submits the draft to his editor, who is amazed by Eddie's work and how quickly he completed it. After returning home, Eddie receives a voice message from his editor. She is so impressed with his writing that she wants to offer him more work. Eddie is overjoyed by this and goes to meet Vernon again to praise the pill he had given him. Vernon then reveals that the pill is actually a drug called NZT, which can unlock 100% of a person's brain potential, allowing them to use their mind at full capacity. Eddie asks Vernon for more pills, but Vernon insists he first run an errand for him, picking up his suit and a burger from the market. When Eddie returns with the items, he finds Vernon has been shot and killed. Horrified, Eddie quickly calls the police to report the incident. Realizing that Vernon's murder must be connected to the pill, Eddie starts searching the apartment before the police arrive. After an intense search, he finds a full packet of the pills, a bundle of cash, and a small diary, which he takes with him. Soon after, the police arrive, and Eddie answers their questions at the station. However, the police are unable to gather any significant information from him and release him. Back at home, Eddie takes another NZT pill and decides to transform his life. He writes another book in just 4 days and submits it to his editor. He also begins learning new skills like foreign languages, playing cards, focusing on fitness, and making new friends. During this time, he meets Kevin, a stockbroker, who introduces him to the world of finance and investing. He receives a card from someone, and during this time, he also makes a lot of new friends who invite him to a party on the beach, where he enjoys a lot with his friends. Then, he gets an idea and thinks that his main work isn't writing, but he could make even more money from the stock market. After researching for a week, he fully understands the stock market patterns. He invests the $800 he got from Vern into the stock market and earns $2,000 in just 1 day. In this way, he starts making a lot of money in a few days, but then he thinks that since he now knows so much about the stock market, he should try with a bigger amount. To get the money, he meets a Russian man named Jerry, who gives personal loans. After meeting Jerry, he gives Eddie $100,000, but also threatens him, saying that if he doesn't pay the money back on time, he will skin him and wear his skin on his head. Eddie then invests all the money in the stock market, and within just a week, he makes $2 million with his sharp mind. Suddenly, with all this money, he becomes very famous in the stock market, and people start talking about him everywhere. Reporters and stockbrokers start following him, and his name appears in newspapers. One day, when Eddie meets his ex-girlfriend Lindy, she is impressed by his changed persona, and they begin a new relationship, spending a lot of beautiful time together. One day, while Eddie is with Lindy, he notices a man following them, but he ignores it and takes Lindy away. The next day, we see that the stockbroker Kevin introduces Eddie to Carl, a famous businessman. After talking with Eddie and hearing his numerous ideas related to the stock market and business, Carl is greatly impressed. He offers to give Eddie a ride home in his car and hands him some files. When Eddie looks looks at the files, he points out many of the company's defaults and offers solutions to solve the problems. Carl is impressed by Eddie's intelligence and invites him to meet again the next day. Later, Eddie gets off the car and starts walking, but during this walk, he starts feeling something strange. This is actually a side effect of the NGT pill, which makes him lose focus. He ends up in several places at once, like a club, a party, and then he sees himself romancing with a girl. Suddenly, he finds himself at a station where some thugs attack him. Eddie doesn't know how to fight, but then he remembers the fighting scenes of Jackie Chan he had seen on TV, and he starts copying that style, defeating all the thugs. Finally, he finds himself on a highway bridge, and after 18 hours, he still doesn't understand what is happening to him. The next scene shows Eddie waking up from sleep. Eddie starts checking the files Carl had given him, but this time, he decides not to take the pills. He doesn't want to experience what happened to him in the past 18 hours again. However, without the pills, he can't make sense of anything. That day, Eddie was supposed to meet Carl, but he still decides to meet him without taking the pills. Since he hasn't taken the pills, his mind functions like a regular Eddie, and he can't understand anything Carl is talking about. While at Carl's place, Eddie sees the news about a girl found dead in a hotel room, the same girl Eddie was with the previous day. Bits and pieces of memory start coming back to him, and he begins to suspect that he might have been the one who killed her. Feeling uneasy, Eddie excuses himself, apologizes to Carl, and runs outside to throw up. He goes back home, and his health starts deteriorating due to the absence of the pills. However, he is determined to learn everything about the pills before taking them again. To investigate, Eddie contacts the numbers listed in the diary given by Vernon, the person who supplied him with the pills. He discovers that most of the people who had been using this drug are now dead. Finally, he calls the last number, but it connects to a man sitting nearby who turns out to be the same person who had been following him. Realizing the danger, Eddie manages to escape and ends up at a cafe where he meets his ex-wife Melissa. Melissa reveals that she used to take the NZT pills too, but she stopped due to their severe side effects. She tells Eddie that after quitting the drug, her face aged drastically, making her look like an old woman. She warns Eddie about the terrible effects of the pills and advises him to gradually reduce the dosage to quit them. Later, Eddie runs into the Russian man, Jerry, who had loaned him $100,000. Jerry attacks Eddie, demanding his money back. During the fight, Jerry notices the pill in Eddie's hand and forcefully takes it. After consuming the pill, Jerry starts feeling great, and Eddie manages to withdraw money from the bank and pay him back. Jerry then leaves, but Eddie's condition worsens, and he becomes desperate for the NZT pills. Eddie goes to his girlfriend Lindy's office and collapses there. Seeing him in such a state, Lindy asks what's wrong. Eddie tells her everything about the drug and asks her to bring the pills from his home. Lindy goes to fetch them, but on her way back, she is followed by the same man who had been chasing Eddie. She runs and hides behind a large rock and calls Eddie to tell him what's happening. Eddie instructs her to take one of the pills for her safety. She hesitates, but ultimately takes a pill, following Eddie's advice. After that, Lindy starts thinking very fast and manages to trick the man, escaping successfully. She then returns to Eddie, gives him a pill, and helps him recover. The next day, Lindy tells Eddie that he should quit using these drugs. She says she only took it once and won't take it again in the future, urging Eddie to stop too. However, Eddie tells her that he can't quit yet, as he has some unfinished business, and asks her for some time to gradually stop using the drug. Lindy agrees. Eddie then takes the pill again and uses his enhanced mind to study the drug. He realizes that if he reduces the dose, avoids alcohol, and eats properly, the side effects of the drug will be minimal. Following this plan, he begins taking the drug cautiously. With his supercharged brain due to NZT, Eddie makes some significant decisions for his future. First, he buys a coat with a secret pocket to safely store his pills. Then, he meets a chemist and gives him an NZT pill, asking him to create a copy of the pill without side effects within 6 months. Eddie pays the chemist a substantial amount for this work. After that, Eddie starts working with Carl, the businessman, and helps take Carl's business to the top. Simultaneously, he invests Carl's and other major businessmen's money in the stock market, making huge profits and eventually becoming a stockbroker himself. Over time, Eddie becomes a millionaire. However, one day, a police officer arrests Eddie because they have footage of him with the girl who died in a hotel. Eddie calls his lawyer, who, after understanding the situation, manages to get Eddie released. Later, when Eddie checks the secret pockets of his coat for pills, he finds them missing. He realizes that the coat, which was brought to him at the police station by his lawyer, must have been tampered with, and the lawyer stole the pills. Meanwhile, Jerry is still after Eddie for more pills. Eddie gives Jerry a few pills to get rid of him temporarily. On the other hand, Carl's company is merging with another large large company owned by Hank. This merger is set to significantly increase the stock prices, and Eddie stands to earn $40 million from the deal. On the day of the merger meeting, instead of Hank, his wife arrives and informs Carl that Hank is in the hospital and the merger will proceed only after his recovery. As the lady leaves, Eddie notices her driver, the same man who had been following him for a long time. Eddie realizes that the driver works for Hank, who was also using NZT pills. Hank's supply of pills had run out, leaving him in a deteriorating condition, which is why his man was chasing Eddie for the pills. When Eddie returns home, Jerry comes and asks Eddie to open the door, but when Eddie doesn't open it, Jerry starts cutting the door. However, Eddie no longer has any pills and doesn't want to face Jerry. He remembers that he might still have one pill left. He immediately starts searching for it and finally finds it, but just then, Jerry breaks down the door and enters with two men. In the chaos, Eddie falls, and the pill slips from his hand and falls to the ground. Jerry's men grab him, and Jerry demands more pills. At this point, we see that instead of taking the pill like Eddie, when Eddie refuses to give Jerry the pills, Jerry's men start searching the entire room for them. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Eddie attacks Jerry and stabs him with a shard of glass. But now, Eddie needs the pill because his condition is deteriorating too. After this, Eddie starts and manages to escape. On the other hand, Hack dies in the hospital, and Eddie goes to Hack's driver, tells him the whole story, and asks for help. The driver agrees and helps him. Then, Eddie goes to the lawyer's house, ties him up, and after a long search, he finally finds the pills. We then jump to a scene 1 year later, where Eddie's book has been published. He has started his own company, and he has become a billionaire. He is now running for president. Just then, Carl enters his office and reveals that he knows Eddie has been taking the NGT pills, which is why his mind works so well. Carl tells Eddie that he has now bought the company that manufactures the NGT pills, and he has shut down its manufacturing unit. If Eddie wants to continue getting the pills, he will have to work for Carl. As Carl is about to leave, Eddie gives him an example, saying that the car coming down the road will crash into the car in front of it, and within seconds, this happens. Eddie then tells Carl that he always thinks 50 steps ahead and doesn't care whether the NGT pills are available in the market or not because he has already made a copy of the pill. The pills he has made don't have any side effects like NGT. Eddie then starts listing Carl's shady business and his dark secrets, which makes Carl afraid of Eddie and leave. In the final scene, we see Eddie and his girlfriend Lindy in a Chinese restaurant. Eddie orders food by speaking in Chinese, and Lindy wonders if Eddie has really stopped taking the NGT pills or not. The story ends here.